Welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today's quick tip is about making tubes. One of the types of bales that I find that people seem to like are tube bales, where you have a chain that goes through a little tube at the top of a pendant. And so oftentimes you can buy pre-made tubes if you want to. Sometimes I buy the curved ones because it's a little easier to just buy them than to actually curve them. But if you just want to make a straight tube, it's not super hard to do. So today's tip, I'm going to show you how to make one of those pretty simply. So let's get started. Okay, I'm going to ask you to think back to your old geometry class a little bit, and I'll give you a trick to figuring out how to make a tube about the size that you want. If you remember, the proportion that the diameter of a tube has with relationship to its circumference is pi times diameter equals circumference, and pi being 3.1415, whatever. And that's close enough to 3 to where we can just round down to 3 and make a pretty good estimate. So let's say I wanted to make a tube that was, say, the thickness of this pen. So if I do that, I can take that and I can use that as a gauge, and if I just do 3 times the width of that pen, roughly 1, 2, 3, make a mark right there. That'll give me the length of the piece of sheet that I need in order to make the tube I want. So I'm going to go ahead and get that piece off, flatten it out. Okay. Then I spend a little time. This side and this side are going to come together, so I want to make sure they're parallel and nice and flat. So I'm going to file those guys a little bit. Alrighty, and to make these things, I find these bale making pliers super useful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by grabbing the edge of this thing in those bale making pliers. And you can actually just wrap these around a cylindrical object too. That'll work as well if you can get a good grip on it. And I'm just going to kind of start looping that around like that. Okay. When you get to the end here, you can push it in a little bit like that. It's pretty close. It's a little misaligned here, so I'm going to try and pull it back in the right direction. Okay. And at this point, I'm going to make it a little not round in order to solder these together. So I'm going to push it past itself a little bit like that. And then pull it back to where they're just barely touching. And then I'm going to squish the end straight down right over the crack there. And that kind of pushes those two ends together. Same over here. Kind of pushes it together. If you need to, you take your flat nose pliers. If the middle is still separated, you can just squeeze the whole thing downwards a little bit, straight on, and it usually pushes it right together. So, all right. Actually popped out of place there for me for a second. All right. Just realigning that a little bit. Okay, once you have those touching pretty well there, let's just sit up right here for me. Grab an older pad that has a little more texture to it here. More likely to stay in place for me. There we go. Alright, I'm going to cut. I'm not going to be thrifty about the solder here. I'm going to use quite a bit because I want to make sure I get a good solid seam all the way down. Alright. And as always, I'm going to flux before I solder, so I'm going to spray some flux on there. You want to get it nice and crusty. If you're one of those people who paints on flux, you could do it that way as well. I'm I'm just going to put, oopsie, I think 2 is probably enough for this one. Notice I cut really big pieces of solder. I'm shaky today. There we go. Alright, so, and since solder is kind of drawn towards the heat when it flows, if you kind of heat in the inside of the tube there, you notice how quickly that just kind of flows along that edge there. Filled in the seam. Now I can just peel this off. And we should have a nice solder seam there, and we do, it looks like. Now we just got to get the tube shaped back into shape a little bit, and you can usually do that with just a little hand manipulation. If it's the right size, you can use the bell making pliers to just put it right over there. This one's actually pretty close, so I can just kind of do the little squeezy thing there. But if it's not the right size, I find the best luck with using the needle nose pliers, just like I do bezels, where I'm kind of pinching the sharp areas out and torquing with my wrist a little bit as well to push the metal where it needs to go. One of the things I struggled with at the beginning was getting the metal to do what I wanted it to do when I was trying to bend it, and thankfully with practice that gets much better. It starts to kind of do what you want it to do. Okay, so that's basically how you make a tube. So if you found this useful, if you think you might know someone who else would find it useful, would you share it with them? Like the video, and don't forget to ring the bell to get notifications of upcoming new videos. But yeah, subscribe to my channel. Thanks again. Happy silversmithing.